What's going on, guys? Welcome back once more. This is episode 4 of So You Want to Be a Powerlifter. And in this episode, we're going to talk about executing lifts to a competition standard. This is something I think people should start very early on. As soon as they decide they want to do a meet, you need to find out about the rules of your federation, what standards the lifts need to be completed to, and you need to start executing with that standard, with that intent, every single rep of your training. The first lift we're going to talk about, because it's the first lift in competition, is going to be the squat. Number 1, depth. You're going to need to make sure that you are squatting to depth in your training. Now, any federation that I know of has the same standard. That's going to be the hip crease and the top of the knee. The hip crease is going to need to travel below the top of the knee at the lowest point of your squat. The next thing you need to make sure you're doing is locking your knees out. This is a big deal. A lot of people get called unnecessarily for this, but before you start your squat and after you complete your squat, make sure you're squeezing your quads to lock your knees out and standing up tall. Another thing I'm gonna advise you guys to do when you're training for a powerlifting meet with your squat is gonna be to hold it for a while after each working set. This will get you used to holding the weight on your back after your squat, because in competition you're gonna have to finish your squat and wait for a rack command before you put the bar back into the rack. Now, if you practice that in your training, the chances of you rushing through and missing that command, and by virtue of that, missing your lift, which is terrible, is going to be significantly diminished. The next thing we're going to talk about is the bench press. Now, there's a whole bunch of little intricacies here, starting with the setup. Now, if you're going to compete in the IPF, and that's predominantly what we're going to be talking about in these videos because that's what I know best. If you're going to be competing in the IPF, you need your head on the bench, you need your butt on the bench, and you need your feet flat on the ground. If any of those come up or shift during the lift, you can be called for that. So make sure you're keeping everything glued to wherever you set it when you set up for your bench press. The next thing that we need to work on in your training, if you're going to be competing as a powerlifter, is going to be pausing your bench presses. Now, I talk a little bit in my how to bench video about a couple different schools of thought with the bench press. One being to pause with a lot of tension on your chest and just kind of almost hover on your t-shirt kind of deal. The other is going to be to actually sort of sink in and relax a little bit. Now, either way you do it, the bar needs to come to a complete stop before you get the press command in competition. So practice bringing the bar to a complete stop every rep of your bench press. Lastly, we're going to be talking about the deadlift. The biggest thing people get miffed on here is going to be the lockout and hitching. So we're going to talk a little bit about those two things. The lockout. First things first, make sure you lock your knees. You'll notice a trend here. Lock your knees, people. Lock your knees and pull your shoulders back into position. Now you see a lot of people finish their deadlifts, their shoulders might be a little bit out in front. That's not going to be locked out enough for a white light. If your knees aren't locked, if your quads aren't squeezed at the top of your deadlift, you're not going to get white lights. So those are the two biggest things to focus on when it comes to your deadlift. Make sure you lock out every rep in training. I see a lot of people train to kind of a soft, almost lockout and drop the bar. Make sure you lock every rep out, hold it for a second, especially if you're doing heavier work, more towards competition, double, singles, etc. Work that lockout. The next big thing people mess up on is hitching in the deadlift. So if you notice yourself deadlifting and you slide your knees under the bar and you kind of rest the bar on there as you kind of inch it up your thighs a little bit, that's not legal in powerlifting. So one thing we want to make sure is that the knees aren't sliding under the bar as it comes forward. All right, guys, so make sure that in your training, you're training to a competition standard every time, because then when you get there on the day, there's all those external factors added in, there's all that extra pressure, there's stress, etc. If you've been practicing to a competition standard, the chances of you messing up and missing a lift on something small and technical greatly decreases. So be smart out there. If you like the video, guys, leave a thumbs up. Make sure to hit that subscribe and stay tuned. The next video will be coming with a free 16-week training template, and we'll be talking a little bit about programming for your first powerlifting meet in that next one. So make sure to stay tuned. We'll see you then.